Good afternoon if you're on the East Coast, good morning if you're on the West Coast, and good evening if you're in Europe or Asia. Welcome to the May 2021 Reach 3030. We have a very good turnout today. As you know, we're giving the Reach 3030s every other month, but the Tosca 3030 remains a monthly event. And a lot of people who are on the Tosca 3030 are now staying for the Reach program. So we're glad to see that. So today we're going to talk about proposals by the European Commission to revise the Classification, Labeling, and Packaging Regulation, CLP. As you know, CLP is the European version of the GHS, and it has a very, very strong impact on labeling, safety data sheets, as well as substances that may ultimately be considered substances of high concern and move into the other various REACH programs. Next slide, please. I'm Herbert Stryker, and I think I've given all of these. Here's my bio. As always, we place the slides and a recording of the presentation on our website. You just have to punch in www.reach30/30, and that'll take you to the various programs that we have every month. Next slide. I'm joined today by Aleš Bartel, who is a Czech lawyer in our Brussels office. And Aleš has been giving co-presenting on all of these as well ever since he joined the firm in April of 2020. I actually haven't met Aleš yet in person because even though I used to shuffle between the US and Europe on a bi-monthly basis for many, many years, I actually haven't been in Europe since January 2020. I understand that the European Commission is announced they will allow travel from the U.S. provided that they can document that they've been vaccinated. So I'm sort of looking forward to being back in Europe. I'm going to let Aleš take over the presentation and join you at the end. Next slide, please. Aleš, can you?
Yes, Herb, thank you for the introduction, and we certainly are looking forward to meeting and greeting you in Europe. Indeed, today we are going to speak about the revision of the CLP regulation, and of course first put it in the context, and obviously in the context of the chemical strategy for sustainability, because the revision of CLP is one of the important elements. So the strategy was announced in October 2020. You can find the initial document under the first link. And it already outlines the main revisions that are envisioned with respect to REACH and also CLP. It's very advisable to keep up to speed on these developments, because right now it's a bit quiet before the storm. But the Commission is really eager to fulfill the main goals of the strategy, that is zero waste future and mainly non-toxic environment in the EU. So it's really a fight against harmful substances, and the European Commission is currently hiring 50 officials to work on chemicals and on the strategy. So they're really serious. Under the second link, you can see a dedicated web page of the European Commission on the strategy. It's not updated very often, but the main milestones are there. So it's good to check it from time to time. But unfortunately it's not very detailed. It doesn't, for example, include all press releases or even some media reflections. So it's really just very basic. But it's good to keep it on eye. Next slide, please. The road plan for CLP revision was first announced in the document issued by Caracal, which is a working group, or let's say a member state working group of the European Commission in March 2021. And the first step in the CLP revision is Inception Impact Assessment that was published on May 4, 2021. So this is very recent, and this is basically the reason why we have this Reach 3030, because the CLP revision has basically started. So you will find the Inception Impact Assessment under the link, but it's just a 3-pager. It includes bullet points with the main elements, but it's not very it's not exhaustive, because we found some other areas that may be included in the CLP revision in other sources. So it's really just a very high level outline on what is going to change. This Inception Impact Assessment is open for feedback currently. So under the link, you will also find a link to the public consultation that is open until June 1st, 2021. Of course, everyone is welcome to contribute, and the industry should contribute, because this Inception Impact Assessment, that means preliminary impact assessment, will be followed by the full impact assessment that is expected in December 2021, and there will be another 2 weeks public consultation for the full impact assessment. And it's really important that because the impact assessment obviously measures the benefits for environment, for human health, but also it's the impact of the measures on industry. So the impact on industry is basically based mainly on feedback received from industry. So industry should voice their concerns, voice what impacts actually these envisaged measures would have on their business. So the indicative timing is that the draft CLP amendment should be adopted 2022 and adopted in 2023. It's very approximate, but it's not possible to say more, to provide a more specific timeline. Next slide, please. So as I said, what is in play in terms of these impact assessments? So the full impact assessment will consider also a range of non-regulatory measures to address the issues. That means that instead of changing CLP, instead of introducing more strict rules and provisions, the impact assessment will also consider not regulating at all with respect to specific measures, and just, for example, to provide additional guidance and support measures based on existing legislation. So that's why industry input is necessary to make the Commission life maybe a bit more difficult if they want to legislate and show that actually the impact on industry is not going to be significant. You have to raise your hand and say this is going to be very significant impact on our business. Of course, the Commission will also envisage provisions that are favorable to industry. So, for example, more flexibility in harmonized classification labeling procedures, more flexibility in labeling. And I think the Commission will be eager to counterbalance, let's say, their revision of CLP. So not only provisions that are conservative, that will impact industry in a negative way, but also that will impact industry in a positive way. So whenever you have the feeling that the CLP system is not flexible, is not well designed, well explained, you should also raise this, and it should normally be incorporated in the impact assessment as an input from industry. Next slide, please. So what are the main elements of the CLP revision? As I said, it does not come only from the inception impact assessment document. It comes also from other sources. So first, and I think this is one of the core elements, new rules with respect to classification of endocrine disruptors. There will be also new hazard classes, changes in the rules for the labeling, changes to the procedure for harmonized classification and labeling. There will be other changes in classification and changes with respect to poison center notifications. So let's look at each of these elements closely now. Next slide, please. So endocrine disruptors. So endocrine disruptors that are identified as endocrine disruptors based on existing legislative tools do not actually bear any hazard labeling, basically, as endocrine disruptors. They may have some related hazard classification, but the hazard classification as endocrine disruptors actually does not currently exist. And so the main aim of the European Commission is to establish a new harmonized classification endocrine disruptor. This will be based on the WHO definition and also building on criteria already developed for pesticides and biocides. You probably know that a couple of years ago, after really long, almost a decade of discussions, the EU finally adopted some criteria to identify endocrine disruptors and included them in the pesticide and biocides regulations. But these criteria have been criticized heavily, not only by industry but also by experts, and are not very workable. So I think that the EU will mainly build on WHO definition and criteria. The possible classification will be known, presumed, suspected endocrine disruptor. And now we go a bit into the reach, but the main consequence of being classified as endocrine disruptor is not only the fact that there will be a label, but endocrine disruptors normally will be banned for non-essential uses in consumer products. And this really comes from, it's really the core principle of chemical strategy for sustainability to ban substances of concern for non-essential uses. And the concept of non-essential uses is still being debated. And I think it will certainly be subject to one of REACH 3030 in the near future, when there is more shape on this. But I think, if I remember correctly, we talked about the newest development on non-essential uses 2 months ago during last REACH 3030, and since then not much has changed. So you can refer to our previous presentation. What is quite important is that recently, in April 2021, the French authority ANSES identified 16 priority endocrine disruptors. And this list is considered as, let's say, a list of priority endocrine disruptors for the assessment at the EU level. So check the list. It includes, I would say, quite major industrial substances. So this is an indication of endocrine disruptors that will be under radar first. Next slide, please. Endocrine disruptors were subject to a recent European Commission fitness check in October 2020. So if you are concerned by endocrine disruptors or interested, check this fitness check document. There were several gaps identified. Data generated by so-called mechanistic tests are currently not required under any of the legislative instruments. Also, the current criteria under legislation of biocides and pesticides are not workable, as I mentioned. And as a result, very few substances are identified as endocrine disruptors so far. So clearly, in reading between the lines, future criteria for ED will be more strict and will include more substances to be classified as endocrine disruptors. But the main issue in the fitness check document was that there are different approaches to risk management depending on specific policy consideration. That means that endocrine disruptors are identified or assessed or managed under different regimes, either under REACH, either under CLP, either under specific legislation such as biocides, pesticides, food packaging that may actually include some risk impact benefit approach. That means that even if substance is classified or identified as suspected endocrine disruptor, it can still be used in a specific application provided that the risk is controlled. And this actually brings us to another element of the chemical strategy for sustainability. Next slide, please. Which is one substance, one assessment. And I think this principle, one substance, one assessment, will primarily be applied to endocrine disruptors, because indeed, currently there are many legislation, many authorities that assess endocrine disruptors. Probably in the future, it will be mainly assessed under CLP. Or under REACH. That means under hazard assessment rather than under risk assessment, which means that once substance is identified as endocrine disruptor, the assessment has been finished and the substance will be phased out for non-essential uses. So current possibilities to use substances of concern, for example, in food packaging, if the risk is controlled, will end for endocrine disruptors and also for other substances of concern, because one substance, one assessment principle will apply to other substances, also not only to endocrine disruptors. Next slide, please. So what are the changes in labeling? So first, review of CLP classification and labeling derogations for some products. Cosmetics are mentioned specifically in the documents by the European Commission. Currently, cosmetics do not have to bear classification labeling, do not have to bear labels according to the CLP. So this may change in the future. So cosmetics may have to bear labels according to CLP. Medical devices and waste, this is with a question mark because this has not been specifically mentioned, but we think that this actually may follow. The classification of waste has been already debated for years, and it's part of the circular economy strategy in the EU. So indeed, there is a plan to classify waste based on their hazard on the same basis as classification of CLP. So it's not really CLP, obviously, it would be waste legislation, but it should be mentioned as well. The revision will also assess clear roles and responsibilities for actors in online sales, because in online sales, it's often not clear who is the importer into the EU, who is the downstream user. So there will be really rules to show who is the importer, and it will be well, first person that introduces physically on the market, but it will probably be also a person that offers in a way chemicals into the EU. And the digital labeling is already in the process of adoption. So I think this will be coupled by the concept of digital labeling that is a bit more advanced in the legislative process. The Commission will also allow multilingual fold-out labels. So as you maybe know, currently the CLP guidance does not really recommend to use multilingual fold-out labels for normal packaging. So if you want to have 22 languages, you should not use fold-out label. You should basically just use several packages for several countries. So this will change. This will change, and I think this is a good thing. That this shows that really the Commission also wants to be a bit more flexible. The same should be with tailored labeling rules where there is not enough space on packaging. So all this will help industry in applying labeling in the future. Next slide, please. So there will be new hazard classes. PBT and Vpvp, that means persistent bioaccumulative toxic and very persistent and very bioaccumulative substances are currently addressed by REACH, but not it's not a hazard class as yet. So again, even if substance is identified as PBT under REACH, it does not appear on its classification and labeling. So this is another milestone for the Commission to introduce PBT and Vpvp as a new hazard class. And according to the European Commission, future classification will be based on Annex 13 REACH criteria, which is quite important. So there will be no new criteria or more stringent criteria. The Annex 13 REACH criteria will continue to apply to the new hazard classification. Then there are new classes of PBT and Vpvp substances, and these are persistent, mobile, and toxic, and very persistent and very mobile. So that means substances that are not bioaccumulative, but that are mobile. And this is already a category of substances of very high concern. So already substances were put on the candidate list because they were identified by the European Chemicals Agency as being persistent, mobile, and toxic. And the mobile element is mainly demonstrated or justified by the fact that the substance can be found in remote environmental environments, such as in Antarctic, for example. But I think this will need probably some further clarification, the mobile element, because probably this will not stand as a classification criterion. But it should be expected that PMT and VPVM will be new hazard classes for environmental toxicity. Next slide, please. Some changes to harmonized classification and labeling are also in the pipeline. So first, the Commission wants to introduce a mandate for Commission to request ECHA to develop new harmonized classification and labeling dossier. So currently, the proposals for harmonized classification and labeling are submitted to ECHA only by the competent authorities or by industry, and mainly it's by the competent authorities. So the Commission wants to be able to submit their dossier as well. Which is maybe a bit tricky from the legal perspective, because the Commission would then be the person that submits the dossier and also the one who decides about the final classification and labeling. But yeah, this probably will have to be handled by Commission lawyers. The Commission wants also to introduce a prioritization mechanism for harmonizing the classification of certain chemicals. So now only CMRs and sensitizers and biocides or pesticides are chemicals that are primarily subject to harmonized classification and labeling. So the Commission wants to extend the list of substances that are primary subject. And I think it will include substances such as neurotoxicant or genotoxicant, and other categories of concern. The Commission wants also to introduce additional opportunity for interested parties to comment in the harmonized classification and labeling procedure. No more information has been provided on what exactly the Commission wants to introduce, but I think from our experience, it would be good to introduce clear rules under which, or clear situations under which public consultation on classification labeling proposal should be repeated, because very often the process is very long. Very often during the process after the public consultation, there is a new information that needs to be addressed, or the authorities, ECHA, change after the public consultation significantly the initial proposal for classification, and the companies actually lose any possibilities to comment on this new proposal or more stringent proposal, just because it's not in the CLP anymore, the possibility to repeat public consultation. So it would be good to have this clarified and introduced. And also, it would be good to introduce possibility for companies to initiate a change of harmonized classification and labeling. So under current rules, companies can introduce a proposal for harmonized classification and labeling of their substance, but they are not able to initiate a procedure to change this harmonized classification labeling. They have to convince a member state basically to submit a proposal on their behalf, which just does not really make much sense. And I think it would be good proposal to change this situation. Next slide, please. Some other changes in classification, such as the harmonization of human health and environmental safety values, PNEC and DNEL. Assessment of the need for specific criteria for immunotoxicity and neurotoxicity that are currently covered under STOT and reprotox categories. And this would also be, this would really be good, because immunotoxicity and neurotoxicity are often categories of concern in, for example, some national food packaging legislation or food additive legislation or processing aid legislation. And it's not really very clear what is the corresponding classification for immunotoxicants and neurotoxicants. They are typically covered by STOT and reprotox categories, but yeah, it's not clear. So this should be clarified. And also there should be clarification on how to apply bridging principles for classification. And this is, I think this should really attract attention, because bridging principles is a very important principle that allows classification of mixtures for which there are no testing data on the basis of a similar mixture or mixture containing similar constituents. So it's basically equivalent of a read across for chemicals in REACH. So currently the bridging principles are not very elaborate in the CLP, and they are let's say subject to different interpretations by the authorities. So if the bridging principles are clarified, it would be good, but it's also possible that it will be clarified in a way that will restrict in the future the use of bridging principles. Because right now the rules, as there are not many criteria, are quite open for broad interpretation. So it should be really followed how the bridging principles will be clarified by the European Commission. Next slide, please. This is a last element, the poison center notifications. So currently, the notification obligation is for manufacturers, for importers, but of mixtures, but it should also in the future apply to distributors. So also distributors would have to make notification into the poison center of their mixture, but it should also apply for substances, which again will extend significantly the notification to poison center, and it has to be seen, for example, if substances also would have to get the UFI codes as mixtures. The UFI codes have been introduced recently for mixtures, so it's possible that the same codes will have to be also introduced for substances. Next slide, please.
Yeah, so we only have a moment or two, but I want to answer a couple of questions that we got in. So somebody asked, well, how do we make sure the CLP allows only representatives to take over the responsibilities of importers under the CLP? As you know, right now, unlike REACH, which has an only representative provision, there is no only representative provision in the CLP. Well, I think in general, if you want improvements to the CLP, and it does seem that the Commission is open to some flexibility to make practical changes to the CLP to make things a little easier, then you have to be engaged in the process. And there'll be different opportunities in the process to get your thoughts to the Commission as to how you see, things that can be improved. I think the, fold-out labeling is a great idea, and there are many other great ideas they're thinking about, but I think people who have practical experience in dealing with safety data sheets and labels on a day-by-day basis probably can think of, dozens of things that are, wrong with how the CLP currently operates. So it's important to get engaged in the process. We may reach out to some of you who've been on this call to maybe put a group together to propose comments on this. It's important that the Commission hear from non-European companies as well, and because those are different considerations perhaps than European entities have. Someone asked if there'd be a de minimis level associated with endocrine disruptors. And endocrine disruptors are considered non-threshold toxicants, although you can rebut that presumption on a case-by-case basis. I suspect that perhaps 0.1% will be the level that will be de minimis. That's certainly the case for PBTs and for CMRs, and I don't see why it wouldn't be the case for EDs as well. And I think the thing that I sort of noticed from this presentation, if you're going to have classification for endocrine disruptors, and you're going to have classifications for persistent mobile toxic chemicals and immunotoxic chemicals and neurotoxic chemicals, then they're going to have to expand the data requirements on the REACH to generate the data to support these classifications. Because as you know, the CLP itself does not require that you do any testing other than the phys-chem properties. And so in order to be able to decide whether you have an endocrine disruptor or a PMT, et cetera, they're going to have to expand the REACH data requirements. And so that's going to be the next thing. And I'm sure that'll go hand in hand. Next slide, please. So in any event, the next REACH 3030 is in 2 months. We're now holding these every 2 months, and it'll be July 14th. And as always, we'll have our slides posted on the websites under www.khlaw.com//REACH 3030. Next slide. Okay, so I think there's an OSHA 3030 on May 19th. Next slide. And I'm Herbert Stryker, and we were joined today by my colleague Alesh Bartel, who I think gave an excellent presentation. Anyway, thank you all for participating, and we'll see you on the REACH 3030 in 2 months, although TSCA 3030 will be next month. Take care, bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.